Welcome to From Center Ice. My name is Courtney, and this is not a fun video. So it's been a while since I've been here on camera talking about the Chicago Blackhawks, and it's because I don't really know what to say, and I don't really quite feel like talking about this team, but that's what we do here. Unfortunately, we've talked about them on the podcast, but just sitting here by myself talking into a camera, the thought of it and the thought of talking about the Blackhawks has just made me feel sick to my stomach, and I currently still do, but if I don't do this now, then I'm never going to, and that just doesn't solve anything at all. I was sitting here just staring at myself on my monitor for about 10 minutes before I decided to hit the record button, and we're just gonna see how this goes. So I put up a tweet yesterday on the From Center Ice Twitter account, and it says, "So much has happened in the past week, and I'd like to talk about it, but I'm still struggling to speak about this team. Anything y'all are particularly interested in my opinions on?" And I got a response that says, "What can we do to separate the anger about what's happened over the past decade from our ability to cheer for a team whose players, at least in the IceHogs case, had zero to do with the past?" And that's kind of been something I've been wanting to talk about, but I don't really know the answers to it, so I figured since I got that response to the question I put out, and that was a good segue into trying to answer this, I would go for it because there are things happening. It is a very busy time in the hockey world. We had the Seattle expansion draft, we had the entry draft, and now free agency's coming up tomorrow. The Blackhawks have made a lot of moves, and normally I would be super excited to sit here and talk about it and want to talk about it with you guys in the comments, but every time I thought about doing that, my head just went completely blank and I felt sick, like I said before, and just dark, and like this team is just toxic sludge. And so since I haven't talked about it on this channel yet, except for the podcast, if you want to listen to Jacqueline and I talk about it in a longer format, I figured I would go over what has happened just in case you haven't heard about what's going on with the Blackhawks organization currently, and then I guess I will just try to process this as I go along. I don't know how this is going to go. We'll see. So before I even start with what has happened, I want to give a big thank you and shout out to some of the reporters who have been covering this in Rick Westhead of TSN, Emily Kaplan of ESPN, and WBEZ in Chicago. If it weren't for them, it's very possible that this organization could continue to hide this for another decade or longer, and that's not okay. So I want to give a major shout out to them. Go read all of their pieces about this if you want more information. I don't have the explicit details in this video because I just can't say them. So if you want to read everything that has been reported so far, please check them out. I will leave links in the description down below for you to click on, make it a little easier, because I know there's a lot to sift through if you just try to do a simple Google search. So in May of this year, there was a former Blackhawks player from the 2010 Cup team who alleges that former video coach Bradley Aldrich had sexually assaulted him during that playoff run or around that time. That in and of itself is big enough and hard enough to deal with, and especially hard enough for the victim or survivor, however they would wish to be called. But then the organization did absolutely nothing about it. Yes, Aldrich no longer had a job after they won the cup, and in the summer of 2010 he was let go or he left. I don't really know what happened. Two players from that 2010 team went to then skills coach Paul Vincent, told him about what happened. He then went to the Blackhawks executives, told them about it, urged them to report this to the Chicago Police Department because one of their employees had sexually assaulted at least one player on the team. That player also met with then mental skills coach James F. Gary, and he convinced the player that the sexual assault was his fault, being that it was the victim/survivor's fault that he was sexually assaulted. It's been reported that there was a meeting between the team executives before the series against the San Jose Sharks with Stan Bowman, John McDonough, Al McIsaac. We don't know who else was there, but all of the big guns were there to talk about this, where they then concluded that they would not report the sexual assault to the authorities. So then they just decided to go on life as normal. You know what happened. The Chicago Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup in 2010, beating the Philadelphia Flyers. And like I said before, Bradley Aldrich was no longer employed by the team during the summer of 2010. It's been reported and said that everybody on the team knew, everybody in the front office, the coaching staff, all of the players knew. And then we had Jonathan Toews last month after he announced that he was back skating. Mark Lazarus of The Athletic asked him about this sexual assault case. He said that he didn't think it was accurate that everybody knew about it, at least until Aldrich left. The main point here being that the front office of this team knew, the executives all knew, the guys in power to do anything about this knew about it and didn't do anything. They weren't there to support their player. The mental skills coach said it was his fault. And then after Aldrich left the Blackhawks organization in the summer of 2010, he then went on to work at 2 universities and then at a high school in Michigan, where he is now a registered sex offender because at every stop along the way he has sexually assaulted a hockey player or multiple players. So then we come to now, after all of this was reported, after the case was filed by the former Blackhawks player. After the news initially dropped, the Blackhawks came out with a statement saying that the allegations lacked merit. They believed they'd be absolved of all wrongdoing. They then filed a motion to dismiss because the statute of limitations had expired, and they also filed another motion to dismiss because they had no statutory duty to report the incident because the player was not a minor, not a dependent adult, not a senior. Also a part of this case is allegations against the Blackhawks for giving Bradley Aldrich a positive review and or employment verification while he was looking for jobs after leaving the Blackhawks organization, which then led him to get these positions elsewhere, positions of power as a video coach, and go on to assault more players. So all of that in and of itself is a lot to process, especially just kind of being blindsided by it. And it was only really 2 months ago, 2-ish months, that all of this was released. Then we come to last week, where we learned that the victim/survivor had to face homophobic slurs and his teammates mocking his sexual assault while he was on the ice at practice, while there were Blackhawks coaching staff there. They heard all of this going down. And that has been a lot harder to process for some reason, and I'm not really quite sure why. I said on the podcast maybe it's because it's that player's peers, they're around the same age. The guys who are executives for the organization, they're all about the public relations, not wanting this to get out. And while that's not a good and or valid excuse for not reporting this, that's probably where they were coming from. And again, that is not excusable in any way at all. But that's not something that the fellow players have to worry about, and yet they go on and mock their fellow teammate for being sexually assaulted. So, another part that I missed was the Hawks have launched an independent investigation. They've hired the lawyer Reed Shar of Jenner and Block in Chicago, but along those lines, they have not committed to making the findings of this investigation public. And while it might expose a lot of bad things, and it probably will, seeing as everything that has come out so far is very bad, you look even worse by saying you're not going to make the findings public. You're not going to just openly let people know what was found because you've covered this up for a decade already. That allows you to further do that. There are people who were with that team who now hold high positions in other organizations. Marc Bergevin of the Montreal Canadiens, he was director of player personnel for that 2010 team. He's now the GM of Montreal. He claims he didn't know about any of this. Kevin Sheldayoff, the general manager of the Winnipeg Jets, was the assistant general manager of the Blackhawks in 2010. He claims he didn't know about this. Joel Quenneville, now head coach of the Florida Panthers, said he would participate in the investigation. I don't recall whether he said he knew or didn't know. I'm going to assume he went with didn't know about it because it would have been a lot bigger news had he said that he did know that this was going on. And apparently the players, if it was more than one, went to the NHLPA, who also did absolutely nothing and said it was between them and the team, who clearly also did absolutely nothing. And this is why I've been having a hard time talking about this team, because until recently, this past decade of Blackhawks hockey has supposedly been the golden years of the organization, winning 3 cups in 6 years. That's amazing. And now that is all tainted, and that's hard to process as someone who has spent the last decade of her life basically just throwing myself into anything Blackhawks and devoting the last decade of my life to this team. Now it just kind of feels like my world was thrown out of orbit and I don't know what to think in my head, and it's all just very hard. But I do want to clarify, yes, this is very hard for fans to deal with, but that does not compare at all to the victims/survivors who had to come in contact with Bradley Aldrich. I can only speak about how this feels from a fan's perspective, but I don't want to make that seem like it's on the same level of what they went through, and I just want to clarify that. But it's difficult, and I really just don't know how to feel, what to say. It would be a lot easier to just say screw this team and go root for somebody else, but it's not that simple. Once you are so passionate about something, you can't just stop that. And when you love something, like fans love their sports teams, you want to see them do good things, you want to see them be better, and just walking away and not talking about it or not talking about the team at all, it's one less voice. And while I don't have a big platform here, it's still one less voice. And this team needs to be held accountable. The people in charge need to be held accountable. The people who knew about this and did nothing need to be held accountable. And if everybody just walks away and ignores the team, that still will not happen. And that's also something that I don't really know how to process in my head, because this is still my team, but that doesn't feel good to say right now. I don't want to say that I am a Blackhawks fan because it feels gross. I don't know what will make it better. Maybe somebody being held accountable for any of this would be a step in the right direction, but I don't know what will make it better or when it will get better. We don't know when this investigation will be done. We won't know the outcome of it for however long. We might not ever know the complete outcome of it if they don't make the findings public. And so right now, it's just conflicting messages going on in my head of seeing the Hawks making moves and doing things and wanting to either be happy about it or be upset about it, but at least talk about it. But on the other side, just not wanting to talk about them at all, because all I really feel is anger and disgust when it comes to this team. And it feels so trivial talking about moves that were made, players that were traded or signed, when there are people suffering because what this organization did or didn't do is a better way to put that. So going back to the question, how do we separate these horrible feelings about what's been covered up for the past decade and what they did, and rooting for the team or the players now? I don't know. There's only 2 players left on this team from those days in Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews. We saw Toews talk about it very briefly, and he seemed rather annoyed by the whole thing. Of course, I was just reading. You can't always judge tone by just reading, but he did. We haven't heard Patrick Kane say anything about it, and I really don't expect those 2 to say anything else at this point. Maybe if there is some sort of conclusion to this, they'll say something. In the meantime, I don't expect them to, even if they're asked about it. Since it's a busy time in the hockey world now, again, the 2 drafts, free agency opening, all of that, Stan Bowman has had to talk to reporters, but he's not answering questions about it, not while the case is still going on. So I don't expect to hear anything meaningful from him, and it's utterly disgusting to me that he still has a job. That would be the easiest thing that this organization could do to show that they actually care about this, is firing him, seeing as he was the GM when it happened and he clearly knew about it. And the fact that he still has a job, I don't get it. People have been fired for less. I don't know. So because the majority of the players on this team, all but 2 of them, were not around when this happened, maybe you can separate that in your mind as you are rooting for those players because you've become attached to cheering for them and wanting to see them do well. I personally want to hope it will be easier to talk about the Ice Hogs than the Blackhawks, but now the Blackhawks own the Ice Hogs, and they were still a part of the same organization back then, but between the NHL, the AHL, you don't know how much messages crossed. At the end of the day, all I'm really left with is I don't know. But I will be here still making videos. That's what I signed on to do. I will be talking about this team. We're not going to let this story die here on this channel, so if you're not fine with that, you can hit the unsubscribe button right now. Trust me, we would love to stick to the hockey. That would be amazing if none of this was happening and we didn't have to talk about it because it wasn't happening, but it is, and nothing good would come from not talking about it. Again, we don't have a large platform here, but people can't just let this story die. And again, a big thank you to those reporters who broke the story, who are still talking about it, reporting about all of the details. That's how we get the news. We don't have any sources or anything, so we rely on them to do it. And it's not easy to report about, and so major kudos to them and a big thank you. And again, I will have links for you down in the description so you can check them out, follow them on Twitter, all of that. I wish that I had more of a concrete answer for you, but I don't, because again, all I have is I don't know, and I'm also still trying to figure this out, and it's very hard because we've had a great last decade of Blackhawks hockey, and just knowing that all of that was going on and people were suffering and the team did absolutely nothing to support their players, I can't make sense of that in my brain. So I don't know. As a fan of the team, all you can really do is keep making noise, keep being loud, keep pressuring somebody to be held accountable for this. And if nobody talks about it, change won't happen. And at the end of the day, that's what we all want, is positive change to happen. And for now, that's all I really have on that, because again, still trying to figure this out myself, and it's not easy. But I do want to say, and I know that I speak for Jacqueline as well as myself, that we applaud the bravery of the victim/survivor for coming out and finally holding this team accountable, or at least taking the steps to do this. It is not easy to come out about this, especially as a male and a male in sports. It is something that is not talked about nearly enough. It's something that I am doing research on, because if we're gonna keep talking about this, the best thing I can do is to provide facts to you all. So we applaud their bravery from that, and our thoughts are with all of them. Everybody who was negatively impacted by this disgusting excuse for a human that was employed by this organization that we unfortunately root for. Our thoughts are with you, and I just hope, beyond all hope, that you are getting the support that you need. And that is where I'm going to end this video. If you've stuck around for this long, thank you. I know that it's not easy to hear about or listen to, but I hope that continuing to talk about this, I can sort of try to make sense of it, or put words to feelings, or at least that's what I'm trying to do for myself. So if that helps you as well, then I am here for you. But all we can do is keep hoping that something good happens, and that people are rightfully punished for any and all involvement that they had. And the only way that is going to happen is if we keep making noise about it. So that's just what we will have to keep doing. So thank you for watching this. I greatly appreciate it. Again, I know it's not easy. It's not easy to talk about. But yeah, if you want to hear more from me or from Center Ice, head on over to FromCenterIce.com. We did just put up, well, not just, but our last podcast episode, we talked about this in a longer format. So if you want to hear that, you can go ahead and listen to that. It's on YouTube channel as well. It's wherever you get your podcasts. Yeah, and all of our social media links are down in the description. So if you aren't following us and would like to, you can go ahead and do that. But I'll catch you all in the next video. Bye, guys.